1 in 68 children born are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, according to the CDC. This shows almost 120% hike in cases reported on 2010. Thanks for being with us. I'm Sandra Vizcaya. April is Autism Awareness Month, so we will be bringing you the latest information aiming to help families in our community who find themselves facing the news that their child has been diagnosed with autism. We will bring experts in the topic so you can make informed decisions when looking for answers. Denise Negron is the Development and Outreach Coordinator for Access Point Project in West Palm Beach. They offer services for children and adults with special needs. She is with us, and she was also with Autism Speaks for 10 years and is a mother of 17-year-old Alejandro, who has inspired her to find answers for her son's autism and to help families who face autism every day. Thanks for being with us. So what exactly is autism?
Autism is a neurological disorder that affects the ability to communicate, also affects the socialization, and it has repetitive behavior.
So repetitive behavior, could you expand on that a little bit?
Repetitive behavior is when the child is doing repetitive behavior. That means turning the lights on and off constantly, for example, spinning the wheels in the cars constantly all the time, sometimes for hours, and stuff like that. It's repetitive
so like
behavior.
Being obsessive with
exactly.
kind of play or something. Okay. So what are the symptoms or red flags to look for in a child that has autism?
A child with autism may present no eye contact. I think one of the most important thing also is to mention that they don't speak or they don't verbalize. They also don't have any interest in when you call him or want them to engage in any activity. They just want to be by themselves or alone.
So they like to play by themselves. They
Correct.
don't have eye contact. They do repetitive. They have repetitive interests, let's just say. And did you mention eye contact?
Eye contact, yes. I remember my son when he was diagnosed. I was calling him and he never looked at me. So that's one of our concerns.
What about bilingual families?
Bilingual families, for example, we went 5 times to the pediatrician with concerns, and he always was saying that, don't worry, he's not talking because you're speaking another language. But you as a mom understand and you know that something is going on. So eventually he got the diagnosis that it was autism.
Can we talk a little bit about denial and the fear that parents who may choose to find out whether they have or not autism with their child?
Yes, absolutely. It's key for the parents to take action quickly, as I mentioned before, because actually there is a study that the Afro-Americans and the Hispanics are getting the diagnosis so late for the children when they are 7 or 8 years old, and they lose so much of early intervention. So that's really, really important to get an action.
Studies show that children who receive an early diagnosis and receive early intervention have a better prognosis as adults than children who don't get the therapies that they need as children. So let's talk about the importance of early intervention. In other words, the sooner you find out that something may be off, the better off that child may have.
Absolutely, yes. My son was diagnosed when he was 3, but prior to that he was diagnosed with developmental delay, which usually is the first diagnosis before autism. And we start right away with therapies: speech, occupational, physical, and behavioral therapy. And today he was not verbal, today he's talking, he's socialized a little more, and he's doing great thanks to that. Yes.
We know that there are many therapies and protocols, as you mentioned, diets and treatments that are recommended once a child is diagnosed. Which are the most effective therapies recommended to most children with autism?
I think all of them are great, but every child is a world because all of them may present the same characteristic, but some of them may have differences from the other. For example, some kids have physical problems and they may need physical therapy. Also, a speech therapy for the kids that doesn't speak. Occupational therapy, so this particular therapy help them in overall with tying tennis shoes or eating and getting dressed properly and stuff like that. And behavioral therapy, which they can control a little more the behavior, and also they use reinforcement so they are able to do more.
Okay, so just to restart, to rehash, once they receive diagnosis, they should enroll therapies as speech if they're behind on their speech for where they are developmentally, occupational therapy to
Correct.
help them with their life skills or motor
Correct.
skills, right? Physical therapy if they have what
Any muscle tone,
muscle tone
yes.
weaknesses, or
Mhm.
and then you mentioned the behavior
Behavioral,
therapy,
yes.
which deals more with these odd behaviors that we were talking about.
Correct.
And so how to correct them. So how much improvement can parents expect from these main therapies?
They can improve even up to 80% or more.
Wow.
Depending each case again, because each child is different. But the earlier you start, the better prognosis you will get in the future. Also, not only the therapies, I think teachers in the school are key for them so they can succeed. And working as a team, parents, school, and therapies will make a much better future for them.
Okay, so after a family does all this work, how much improvement do we see? How soon do we see it?
All depends. Again, each child is different, but the most you provide to them, the quicker and the better they will be performing in the future as well.
Can children lose their diagnosis?
There is no cure for autism yet, but for sure we know that the early intervention make them much better. They perform better, they can tolerate everything better, and they, like my son, for example, that was not verbal today, he's talking. So I mean, it really works.
What is the percentage of children with autism, if you know, that are nonverbal?
I think it's around 50% or 49% that are not verbal, yes.
Does speech therapy help that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what can the lack of speech cause?
The lack of speech can, it's a lot of things. I may say that the behavior changed dramatically because they are not able to say how they feel, if they have pain or if they want something. And most of the time, because of that, they turn a little aggressive and start having behavior issues.
So we want to try to get these children to be somehow verbal, even if
Correct.
it wasn't
They
100%
can,
verbal.
yes, they can use even sign language. They can use the technology today.
I've seen, like,
iPads is
iPads,
great.
right? Yeah, wow.
iPads are amazing for the child that are not verbal, and they are so much into that.
Wow, I can imagine
Yes.
the relief that may be for both the child
Absolutely.
and the family being able to communicate, the feelings or what they want. Could you give me an example of the future of a child who did not receive therapy as a child versus one who received many hours of therapies?
Wow, it's a little sad if that happened, because if the child didn't have any kind of therapy, behavior issues are one of the biggest things. Especially they turn aggressive. Some of them, again, every child is different, but the child, on the contrary, that has therapy or early intervention, some of those kids eventually are able to work and are able to marry.
So can a child who receives versus one who does not receive intervention make a difference between being independent, growing up, getting
Correct.
a job, not living with their parents, versus one that may be always isolated all their life?
Correct, and they might be probably with the parents for the entire life.
Wow. What is the first step then that a parent should take if they suspect that their child may have autism?
The first things they have to do is to go to the pediatrician, and then usually pediatricians refers them for a psychologist or neurologist so they can do an evaluation, and after that they can determine the diagnosis, and after the diagnosis then comes early intervention, which is key.
all these treatments and
Correct.
therapies they need to start scheduling. And also something important is not be afraid. So according to the American Association of Psychiatrists, autism spiked at 800% in our students between the years of 1993 and 2003. You, Denise, mentioned that 1 in 48 boys that are born are diagnosed, and 1 in 89 girls are diagnosed with autism. What do you see in the future if these numbers don't change? It's kind of like an epidemic, right? We're not sure what causes it, if we can treat it. What do you see knowing so much about this topic?
Well, this for sure is an epidemic. As you know, and as you mentioned, it's 1 in 68 children diagnosed with autism, 1 in 42 boys, and 1 in 189 girls. because autism affects the boys 5 times more than girls. What the future holds, we don't know yet. For sure, we know early intervention is key. We don't have a cure yet. The cause, there are several things, probably environmental factors, genes, and many other factors. It looks like there is not only one thing that is causing autism, or several things, but the research still working on it. And we hope that the parents that has a child with autism do everything they can in their power, commitment, passion, love, and push the kids to do everything and encourage them to do a lot of things in the society, intervention, so they can have a better future.
So for all the Christian families, watching, because we're supposed to be compassionate and reach out to those that can't speak for themselves, what can we do as parents to teach our children on how to behave with these families in school?
I think they need, compassion, they need support. And I hope everybody can get involved some way so they can help the family and the child. It's so important that to be accepted. I think acceptance is key. And that will be a big thing for our families if they accept our kids as their own and help them.
So important to create awareness, which is why we're wearing this blue color.
Correct.
Right? It's the color of Light It Up, Autism Month. Tell us how to get a hold of you. I
can be reached at the Negron at theaccesspoint.org. Also, my phone number is 866-537-2253.
Thank you so much for being with us, and I'm sure this won't be the first time that we get to talk to you.
Thank you.
April is Autism Awareness Month. Hello, I'm Sandra Vizcaya, and here at WFGC, we are lighting it up blue to create awareness of this condition affecting 1 in 68 children. We will have exclusive interviews with experts in our area on how these families can find the resources that they need. Don't forget, we have an exclusive special on autism right here on WFGC, and I can't wait to bring it to you. The CDC says 1 in 68 children are diagnosed with autism. April is Autism Awareness Month, and here at WFGC, we are bringing you a special, bringing the latest information on autism and how to find resources here in our area to help children and families with autism here in our community. Thanks for being with us. I'm Sandra Vizcaya, and today we are talking to Doctor of Occupational Therapy, Dr. Pilar Sa. She is the founder and owner of Interplay Therapy with 2 locations in the West Palm Beach area. Dr. Sa specializes in sensory integration, which is known to be key in helping children with autism. Thanks for being with us, Dr. Pilar Sa.
Thank you.
What is occupational therapy?
Well, occupational therapy is a health profession that specializes in the treatment of children and adults and elders that helps them with the participation in their daily occupations. So we use daily activities that promote more functionality so they can be participating in their daily life as much as they want to be participating.
Okay, so when it comes to autism, what are some sensory red flags that could mean your child may be in the autism spectrum?
Sensory processing disorder or sensory integration difficulties are known to be encountered in children with autism in about 75 to 80% of them. So much that one of the criteria for diagnostics in the DMS diagnostic criteria is that the child has some sensory difficulties. There are 2 main difficulties with sensory processing or sensory integration. The first one is children who are very sensitive. They don't understand information that is coming through their senses, so noises are too loud. If you touch them, they are too overly reactive. Or children who have difficulty with coordination disorders, so they don't know how to do the things that they want to do, which causes frustration, and that's why we see sometimes a lot of temper tantrums and things like that.
So in autism, obviously the sensory can be in the way of natural development and play and the things that any little child can do.
Absolutely. So you can see difficulties with even speech production, because I don't know how to organize my words to say what I need to say, with motor control, because I don't know how to build the tower what I want to build, and with actual feeling good in my body because everything is too light, too bright, too loud. It hurts me, so I cannot be comfortable in my body.
Is there a specific red flag, or could you give us an example of an infant or a child displaying sensory issues?
Yes, very early on, what you start seeing is children who over-focus on objects because those are the most comfortable objects for them, or that avoid certain sensations. Children who do not want to be brushed, they don't want to be touched by the mother, they extend too much or overreact to touch. They overreact to sounds. They cry too much when they are in a natural environment that is full of children that other children do not seem to be so reactive to.
So could this be some of the social disconnection that some of these kids may have? Like they don't want to play as much?
There's actually been some research that shows that when you improve the sensory participation, the sensory processing of these children, their ability to socialize and to participate in daily occupations significantly improves.
So how do we know our children are on track developmentally? Does it usually mean that it's autism if someone is displaying some of these things? Because I think that's probably a fear factor in some parents.
Yes, and that's a great question. So the best thing to do is go to reliable resources on development. So go to the CDC, go to your local pediatrician, go to your local early intervention groups, and they usually have developmental criteria that your child needs to be meeting. A lot of websites that are from universities or developmental groups, they have developmental criteria on what are those motor and sensory and language criteria that a child has to meet. The other thing is not always autism. So you may have a developmental delay, you may have coordination disorders or sensory difficulties, and sometimes when we treat those issues, you may realize, well, it was just a sensory difficulty, it was just a coordination problem, it's not certainly autism, but it's very associated, so it's better to act quickly and to react early than to not react.
Right. So you can find very easy that a child just has some kind of a sensory issue, and a little therapy may just get them over that developmental milestone that they need to, and that's it, instead of maybe hoping it just goes away, which may not always.
Absolutely. It certainly doesn't go away. There's certain different varieties of what sensory difficulties children encounter. Some of them are limiting to function. So we have some children who are so sensitive or have so much difficulty with sensory processing that they cannot function in daily life. Some other children have what we call sensory preferences, right? The children that like more activity than others, but they can certainly function in the school, at home, in the playground, and at birthday parties. So those children don't need to have intervention. They just need to have an environment that supports those needs.
And I love that, because that leads me to our next question, which talks that this type of therapy highlights the emphasis on the importance of play. So could you explain what happens in the brain of a child as they play and go through all of that exploring and getting messy and all those things that little children do?
Absolutely. So when the child plays, there's a lot of neuronal connections that are building, and they are trying and experimenting with their bodies. They are making connections, and they're learning what are things, how do they feel, how does my body react, and how can I do it better next time. So there's a lot of neural connections, like I was saying, that are built through play, and that the more that you get involved in those messy play, in the construction play, active play, rather than just to be in front of the TV or in front of video games all the time, is going to build more of those neuronal connections that are going to build coordination, build my ability to understand the world through my senses, understand that it's okay to be messy, then I can wash and I can feel okay, and all of that's going to give me an understanding of my body, of my skin, my tactile system, which in turn, next, when I have dirt on my mouth, then I'm like, okay, there's dirt, that's food, so I can clean it up and just move on.
It's so interesting, because you're saying that as a parent, I know that we live in a nation where we just have phobias about germs and bacteria and viruses and sickness, so we maybe tend to protect our children from these natural experiences. And the other thing you mentioned so important is the isolation that technology now allows for our children, typical children, that may kind of be hampering some of those natural experiences that most children should get, so that their brain can really move forward with the natural development. So.
Right. I was just at the American Occupational Therapy Association National Conference, and there was a lot of research on how much outside gross motor play do children need to engage in. And pediatricians usually recommend half an hour a day, but what occupational therapists have been finding is that about an hour a day or an hour and a half a day is the best for the brain and for the child development. That's going to teach them how to climb a tree, how to use your body. If the tree is too slippery, well, what can I do? Let me bring that chair so I can, reach that branch, or, let me figure out things with my body and with my environment to solve those problems. Things that we cannot encounter if we are home sitting, and playing video games. About the germs, yes, we have to play that balance between keeping our children safe and exposing them to, playing in the mud and playing in the, dirt and, going barefoot to places, because that really gives them a sense of their bodies, that keeps them in touch with nature, really develops their body awareness very nicely.
Yeah, so that looks like they come from school from being on demand all day, and they come and it's okay to take them to the playground and do gymnastics or do all these things instead of just having that life that's more inactive and just go home and get into those routines that we all think are so important.
Absolutely.
Now, there are so many resources that are out there when it comes to occupational therapy. Could you explain the difference between what offers sensory integration and the occupational therapies that do not? Or
yes, there is a little bit of a difference. Both types of occupational therapy. So what we do is we choose what we call our frame of reference. It's like a frame of mind. How am I going to address this child? What is the model that I need to use to approach this intervention? And for those children that need more of a sensory approach, a sensory integration approach, then we're going to use more of a what we call bottom-up approach. We're going to fulfill those underlying foundations for more functional participation. So we're going to go from the sensory systems, play, motor control, perception, until you build up the very more functional occupations, which are, handwriting and catching a ball and doing mazes and puzzles. Other types of therapies, which are very well approved as well, like the therapies that are given in school, are more top-down. They are the ones that need to resolve the issue right away. And they have different models of practice that tell you, go to the level of the problem. And if the level of the problem is handwriting, we're going to focus on handwriting. So that is the difference. One goes from the top down and one goes from the bottom up.
So two things. When it comes to the school system that offers this support for children that need OT needs in the public schools, would that be enough to rehabilitate a child with autism?
Well, that is a very controversial question. I think schools do the best that they can do with the resources that they have. Not every child needs outpatient intervention, but a lot of children with autism, when they have an outpatient intervention that is based in sensory processing or sensory integration, research has shown that it's so much more beneficial for the child, and that gets the goals met easier and faster sometimes than other interventions. So what the school system does is that takes that child and helps them participate in that one occupation of education.
So what is the first step a parent must take from an OT point of view as soon as a child receives an ASD diagnosis?
Oh my goodness, that is such a confusing and overwhelming time for parents. And I think the best thing they can do is, take a breath, find somebody that they can trust in, and that they can take one step at a time. Sometimes parents want to do it all, want to read it all, and that gets them very overwhelmed. So finding the right person that they can, trust, that they can confide in, and that will take them at their own pace. Some parents are focused and they can take the pace that the world puts upon them. Some parents need to take it a little bit slower. So you need to find that person that's going to take you at your own pace. As far as intervention, I think an evaluation is the first thing and the most important thing that needs to happen at the first moment, because that will tell you where to start. You know, is it a sensory processing problem? Is the problem the engagement and the social emotional connection? Is the problem more of the play, or is it all together? And how are we going to make a team that is going to support this child at the very root of what the problem is?
Yeah, because every child is different.
Every child is different.
So it's almost like targeting the areas of need.
Absolutely.
Right?
So an evaluation is the best way to go.
So describe a typical plan of care. How many times a week, and how long would the treatment last?
Yes. Oh my goodness.
See results, right?
Yes. So there has been several types of research in sensory integration based occupational therapy. So usually in 30 visits, so research has shown that in 30 visits you can already see progress. Goals get achieved. There has been 3 randomized controlled trials that tells me that in 30 visits goals has been achieved. That doesn't mean that you can discontinue treatment right away. It depends on the severity of the child. Some children need 3 times a week, some children need 2 times a week. I wouldn't start with less than 2 times a week, and it usually lasts for over a year, between a year and 3 years. If a child has a true diagnosis of autism, I would say that it lasts.
Wow, but it's worth a while, because as you say, after 30 visits you start seeing improvement, right?
Absolutely, and we just grow with the child, and our goals change every time that the child achieves them.
So what can we expect to be the changes after those treatment begins from a sensory perspective? How can the social and academic or learning life of a child improve after engaging on occupational therapy?
I think that's a great question. I think the first changes are so subtle that parents sometimes don't even realize until we meet with them, 6 months down the road, and we're like, okay, this is how your child was. What have you seen? And they're like, oh my goodness, this is how he was. I haven't seen this anymore, because they are so subtle and they're so, slow to get there, but so radical. Engagement, I think, is the first thing. The child pays more attention to the parent, gets more back and forth with the parent, can read the signals from the environment, and feels better in their bodies. They're able to engage with others and with the environment in a more appropriate way, which is fantastic, because that's the way children learn.
Wow, that sounds like such a process, but so worth it if we're really going to see our kids, rehabilitate and be out there and be the children that God called them to be.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much, Pilar, for being with us. Could you share with us, where can parents get a hold of you?
Yes, well, we have a website. It's interplaytherapy.com. You can always reach us via email. It's Pilar, Pilar, at interplaytherapy.com. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And don't forget, next week we will be talking to a speech therapist about the importance of helping children with autism on how to communicate, and how this therapy is one of the most important to include during early intervention. Remember that you can check out this interview on Santa Vizcaya at YouTube. We'll see you next week.